Welcome to the launch event for the Crossborder Forum's Lived Experience Strategy. And welcome to some of the co-developers of the strategy who are on this call. I can see Farah and I can see Selyu. So thank you very much for joining. And of course, Lorraine, who's here and who will be participating in the session. I also want to thank some of the forum's funders who are on the call today. So we've got EPIM and Rosa Luxemburg who are represented. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to take us through the agenda for today. So first we'll have a poetry reading by Lorraine. Then we'll have an introduction to the strategy. And then an analysis of the consultations, which Chung is going to lead on. And then we'll go through the 5 recommendations from the strategy. Then Lorraine will talk a bit more about her experience as a co-developer of the strategy and her reflections. And then we'll go into a Q&A and hopefully, if we have time, discuss some next steps. So now I'm just going to briefly introduce the speakers that we have today. Okay. Dr. Chung-Ah Baek is an external consultant who supported the development and writing of the strategy, and Lorraine is one of the experts by experience who participated in the development of the strategy. Lorraine is a migrants' rights campaigner and community organizer, grandmother, and a refugee. As a 2-time author, her books document personal as well as collective experiences of the UK asylum and immigration system. Chung is a researcher specializing in displacement and migration, climate change and gender, with over 8 years of experience across various industries. She is also focused on empowerment and resilience of East and Southeast Asian communities in the UK. Her work ensures that the lived experiences of these communities inform and shape policies and practices. Now I'm going to hand over to Lorraine, who is going to read some poetry for us.
Hi, everyone. Yeah. So the first poem I'm reading is from my book, I Was Not Born a Sad Poet. And this poem is called How to Walk With Me. The poem is written in the form of what they call ABCDarian. So every line will start with the letter of the alphabet from A to Z. So here we go. How to walk with me. Accept me as I am. Be with me in my struggles. Converse with me. I'm human. Diligently and with dignity, engage with me. Every passing minute we lose focus when we engage in hate. Greet me and light my spirit. Human I am, so are you. Indifference is not an option. Just like a beating heart, think not of stopping. Kill the state of knowing. Be curious instead. Let me hold your hand and walk with me. My journey finishes when all are free, nobody left behind. Only holding each other's hands. Pity is not to be served now. Let's walk. Questions shall be answered, revisited at the end. For now, let's walk. Soon we shall celebrate through all the barricades of systemic abuse. Until the end, this walk is all we have. Victory or life, our lives are on the line. Who really wants to live like this? examined and inspected every day when reporting, you wouldn't know it unless you walk with me. So zero down with me and hold my hand. Let's walk. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. That was beautiful. Was there a second poem that you wanted to read?
After
Okay.
the talk.
That's good. Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So now I'm just going to, take you and introduce you to the strategy itself. First, by talking a bit more about why we developed this lived experience strategy. And please let me know if the slides aren't working and if you can't see the screen that I'm sharing. So why did we develop a lived experience strategy? So it came from an observation that currently there are a few Cross-Border Forum members who have lived experience of the immigration system or are part of organizations that are led for and by people with lived experience. And also that, personally, and I think also within the forum, there is a commitment to racial equality and justice, and the principle that people who are affected by an issue should be involved in work and campaigning on that issue. And then in April 2023, following a discussion about working groups and specific joint work with forum members, it was agreed that this work and developing a strategy would become a strategic goal for the forum. And I think as well, another major reason for developing this is that both funders and the civil society sector, especially in the UK, have been doing a lot to develop this work. So I think it made sense for the forum to also develop this work. And I think, with the forum at a stage where it's starting to set up its own processes and become more formalized, it makes more sense to integrate a strategy on lived experience as you go and as you're building the processes, rather than building the processes and then retroactively trying to change those processes for them to be inclusive of people with lived experience. It's just, I think it just makes more sense and is more equitable if you're building both at the same time. So how did we develop this lived experience strategy? It's been many, many months in the making. So we started in April 2023, when there was a decision by members to make work with lived experience community leaders or experts by experience into a strategic goal for the Cross-Border Forum. And then from August to October, I interviewed 7 experts and community leaders, some of whom are here, who were based in the UK, France, and Senegal. And yeah, basically in those interviews, I asked them the same set of questions to try and better understand what engagement with people with lived experience could look like in the forum, and also to gauge out of their experience for them out of this process. And then in October, that's when we got Chung to get involved, because yeah, it was a lot of work for me to do, as I'm the only full-time staff member at the forum, and on doing the, and then based on those interviews, we organized a group workshop with the interviewees to formulate recommendations. So really from the get-go and from the design of the strategy, we wanted to make sure that the people that we were soliciting and involving were co-creators of the strategy. We would take that and do what we wanted with it. We really used the interviews to then draft some recommendations based on what was said. And then we did an interactive session where people were able to vote and formulate different recommendations. And then later in November, we had a feedback session with forum members, which was a really useful and fruitful discussion as well, where we presented the recommendations that had been co-developed by our 7 experts, and they gave some additional input and expertise and perspective based on their engagement with the forum and their own work. And then finally, we integrated that feedback and redrafted the recommendations again. And then in early December, we presented these initial recommendations to forum members. And then finally in January, we finalized the text of the strategy and translated it into French. And then finally now we're in February and we're launching the strategy. So that was all of the different steps that have led us to today. Now I'm going to hand over to Chung, who's going to talk us through the analysis and key themes.
Yes, thank you, Francesca. So as Francesca said, we did a couple of workshops with some of the experts. So throughout the consultations, we identified key themes, as you can see in this slide. So understanding lived experience, engagement and strategic decision-making, policy on anti-racism and border issues, mutual benefits and support, and compensation and support mechanism. So I'm going to briefly what these themes are, from the next slide, please. So our first theme focuses on the complexity of lived experience within a cross-border context. So during our consultation, the term lived experience sparked a kind of vibrant debate. So for example, some participants questioned the spectrum of individuals covered, from undocumented migrants, workers at the Belgium-France-UK border, to Western migrants. So how to ensure lived is neither too broad nor too narrow was also kind of the focus in our consultations. So there were diverse opinions on how to define lived experience in a way that is more inclusive and specific to the cross-border context, and using the French term to describe those impacted and concerned by the shared border, which Francesca will describe later. But what is important here is that we need to consider the term that captures the essence of the forum's mission and goals. So we need to develop a comprehensive yet focused definition that resonates with all stakeholders, reflecting the realities of those the forum aims to serve, and how we define this term, lived experience, like I said, will be discussed later in this lunch event. Moving on to our second theme. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So our next slide, our next theme is engagement and strategic decision-making. So our consultations revealed a need for inclusivity and effectiveness at all levels of strategy and decision-making. So participants voiced concerns over the clarity and impact of advisory roles within the forum, highlighting the potential for these positions or the participation in the forum to become more tick box exercises and to become just symbolic. So the call for transparent decision-making and open communication was strongly raised in our consultations, which emphasized the importance of building the trust among members. So this emphasizes the urgency of ensuring genuine empowerment and influence of those with lived experience over the forum's direction. And next slide, please. Okay, so our third theme centers on the pressing need for an explicit anti-racism policy. So participants connected border violence directly with systemic racism, urging for comprehensive policy that addresses these interlinked issues. So our experts highlighted the shared value-based approach as essential, with a strong emphasis on understanding how structural racism permits border policy and violence. So recognizing this intersection between racism and border violence calls us integrate these critical concerns into the forum's core discussions, paving the way for strategies that confront on or address structural racism. So I'm going to talk more about this kind of link to the recommendation of creating a statement on anti-racism later. And then next slide, please. Yeah, so our fourth theme is mutual benefits and support. So these consultations, our consultations revealed the significant emphasis and need on practical support. So our participants detailed the need for financial support, fundraising assistance, mentorship, networking opportunities, information sharing, capacity building, and translation services and others, especially for those small organizations who lack the capacity. And also like the skills development and strategic planning support, as well as well-being support, was highlighted as a way to empower members, especially those directly affected by cross-border issues. So this theme was not just about providing aid, but about more building a framework of mutual support where capacity building and resource sharing empower every member to thrive and contribute to the forum together effectively. So this is really a key to building a robust support system within the forum. And the next slide, please. Yeah, so our fifth theme, the next thing we identified was compensation and support mechanism. So compensation for participation, especially for those with precarious immigration statuses, emerged as a complex challenge. So some raised concerns about the implementation challenges, particularly for asylum seekers for whom traditional forms of compensation might not be feasible. So this discussion led us to explore alternative compensation methods, such as vouchers or indirect support through organizations, or also travel reimbursement, which stresses the forum's commitment to valuing every participant's contribution in a respectful and practical manner. So developing a fair and practical compensation mechanism was the key. And I didn't include these recommendations in the slide, but there were additional recommendations and suggestions that we found in our consultations. So some suggested organizing physical and hybrid format meetings, emphasizing the value of face-to-face interactions for building trust and understanding, while also acknowledging the need for flexibility to accommodate those who are unable to travel due to financial or immigration constraints. So this balanced approach will highlight the importance of accessibility and inclusivity in the forum's engagement strategies. So this is something that the forum can consider. And another thing is that the participants stress the need for clear communication and realistic expectations to avoid misunderstandings and conflict. And finally, concerns about overburdening participants in the forum, especially those navigating the immigration systems or facing other challenges, were also raised. So through these key themes, we have shaped strategies and recommendations, which will be further presented. But before we jump into the recommendations, I think Francesca will talk about how we define lived experience.
Thank you. Right, so as Chung highlighted, there was a lot of debate around how we define lived experience and what terminology should we be even using. And so in general, you could say that someone with lived experience in the context of the forum's work is someone who has lived experiences of the issues that the Cross-Border Forum works on. So the Cross-Border Forum works on cross-border migration, asylum issues, deaths at the border. So those would be lived experiences that count. But really, if you were taking it literally, it could also include people who are working at the border, volunteers, workers, and like other people who are involved in the cross-border region. So we didn't feel that just keeping it in that way was really accurate in terms of what we were trying to capture in the strategy. So we decided to refine this definition to experts by experience, because we wanted to center and recognize people's expertise on immigration issues and policies because of their personal experience of the border and immigration processes. And this term is inspired by a term that's used in Belgium, expert du vécu, which is used in a lot of anti-poverty campaigns. And I know that experts by experience is also used by members of the forum rather than lived experience. And in French, to translate it, then we opted for expertise du vécu or expert du vécu, rather than premier concerné, which literally translates to first concerned, because we didn't want to use language that was creating a sort of hierarchy in terms of experiences. Because if there's a first concern, then it implies that there's a second and third and fourth concerned. And we also felt that this term more accurately reflected the meaning in English.
Thank you. So yeah, I will just present the recommendations. But we developed five recommendations. So, and each recommendation is connected to our key analysis and themes that I just presented. So our first recommendation is participation of experts by experience in strategies and decision-making bodies and processes. So basically, this recommendation advocates for involving experts by experience in the forum's strategic planning and decision-making. And with these experts by experience, we aim to leverage their unique insights to guide and shape the forum's strategies and policies. And the rationale for this recommendation is deeply rooted in our discussions, where a recurring theme was the need for genuine decision-making power for these experts. So there was kind of a repeated skepticism about the effectiveness of traditional advisory roles, which often led to tokenistic engagement rather than substantive contributions to decision-making. So we found that there is a strong demand for clarity in the roles of experts by experience, which means there is a need for their genuine empowerment and direct impact on policy and strategy development in the forum. And this led to our suggestion of transitioning from just nominal involvement to the meaningful participation, to ensure these voices are not just heard, but are also fundamental in shaping the forum's actions. And then, in addition to this, we also identified a clear need for transparency in how decisions are made and communicated with the forum members. So through these recommendations, the forum can commit to a path where experts by experience exercise genuine decision-making power. And next slide, please. Yeah, so this recommendation is directly connected to one of our key themes about the anti-racism and policy. So in confronting the challenges of border and state violence with the underlying currents of racism, our second recommendation proposes the development of a public anti-racism statement and an internal policy on anti-racism and safer spaces. Again, the development of this recommendation was heavily influenced by insights gained from the consultations. So many of our participants emphasized the intersection between racism, border violence, and also the experiences of those the forum aims to support. So here, the development of a public anti-racism statement is our effort to acknowledge how deeply racism is embedded within immigration policies and border regimes, serving the foundation for an internal policy that commits to safety, respect, and equity. And we also found that there is a strong need for a shared value-based approach within the forum to build trust and a safe space for all members, as well as using these values to shape the forum's work. So for us, I mean, for the forum members, that creating a safer space is essential. And here the safer spaces means it's an approach to creating and holding a space that is focused on reducing the potential harm, violence, and also abuse that arise in the space, either physical or virtual, ranging from microaggressions and triggering people through accepting behavior or language, and also to abuse of power or assault. So to do this, it requires a collective discussion on inclusive language and anti-racism. So it is very important to make sure that, so there is another thing that it's very important to make sure that this development and also revision of public statement and internal policy, we need to consider this as an ongoing process, which necessitates regular reviews and updates to reflect the evolving understanding of anti-racism. So this strategy will ensure a safe and inclusive space for dialogue and collaboration within the forum. And this is a step kind of towards promoting a shared vision for a more equitable and just community. And next slide, please. Yeah, and our third recommendation is valuing people for their time. So what this means is that the forum needs to value experts by experience for their time and contributions to the forum. So it is a recognition that equitable participation requires acknowledging the effort and insights of those with the lived experience. So therefore, it is suggested that the forum implements a structured compensation process, incorporating legal guidance and also flexible support mechanisms. One of the concerns is that there are diverse needs and also various like immigration status, also precarious situations of individuals, and how to compensate or how to value their time, because especially those with uncertain immigration status, there is a complexity of compensation mechanisms. So we suggested various forms of support, from vouchers to direct financial support, so emphasizing the need for flexibility in recognizing contributions. So through this strategy, we think the forum can aim to recognize the value of lived experiences, but more importantly, it can set a precedent for equitable and respectful engagement with experts by experience, ensuring their contributions are, of course, valued, but also recognized in tangible ways. And I think I will hand, hand over to Francesca. Yeah.
Thank you, Chung. I'm now going to talk you through the final two recommendations. And so the fourth recommendation is providing additional support and resources to experts by experience members. So this was a recommendation that was formulated based on conversations around what people would need in order to really be able to participate. So in a sense, it's a recommendation that enables that the first few recommendations are able to be enacted. So this includes support beyond the financial support or compensation that Chung has just talked about, and includes other forms of resources that includes capacity building support, mentoring, well-being, and mental health support. And this would also apply to smaller grassroots organizations that have limited capacity or resources, or maybe have a high turnover rate or a small number of staff. We know that this is something that will be able to help those smaller organizations really participate in the forum and be more supported in their participation. and in particular well-being and mental health support, which could take place through, for example, like group therapy sessions, or basically a session where an external psychologist leads a facilitated discussion where people are able to talk about the challenges that they face at work. Because obviously we work on cross-border migration, which oftentimes is really traumatizing and very emotionally demanding. And so it's important, I think, to build in those support mechanisms so people can be more resilient, and also from that resiliency be able to engage more sustainably with networks like the Cross-Border Forum. And again, this recommendation would help build trust, autonomy, and sustainability. So trust in between forum members, because you're being offered more opportunities to work with each other or to engage with the forum. Autonomy, because if you're being supported through like fundraising, capacity building support, or mentoring or networking opportunities, then that leads to more trust between members and also autonomy. And then finally, sustainability, because we are trying to ensure that it is both sustainable from an economic perspective, you know, if people are being supported in terms of their fundraising capacity, but also sustainable in terms of human resources, you know, just in terms of the people who are doing this work. And finally, I'm going to talk to you about recommendation 5, which is changes to cross-border forum ways of working and processes by instilling transparency, clarity, and accountability. We've heard a lot of these words in previous recommendations, specifically on the importance of being clear and transparent. But what really came through in the discussions that we had, as Chung was talking about in the analysis section, is that like one of the barriers towards grassroots organizations, experts by experience, or organizations that are community-led is not just the racism or the lack of a safe space in which people are meeting, but also the lack of clarity around the engagement processes, decision-making processes, communication, and delineation of responsibilities. And actually, if you make the terms of engagement and participation really clear and accessible and transparent, then that is a way through which people can feel more confident in engaging. And also there's a sense from the beginning that you're setting the parameters of the engagement. So you're not saying, you know, you're participating in something and the goals of that participation aren't necessarily clear. Like, I think it's really important to make sure that it's clear from the get-go what people can get out of engaging in something, and that if it's not a decision-making process or opportunity, for example, that's okay, but it just needs to be said. And again, it's a way of building trust between members through that clear communication and transparency and accountability, especially because the Cross-Border Forum meets in an entirely online collaboration environment for now. So if you don't have clear communication online, then that ability to collaborate long-term is inhibited. And that's the end of our recommendations. I'm now going to pass over to Lorraine to ask her to reflect on her experiences and reflections.
Thank you both for your very detailed presentations. Yeah, so just to introduce myself to people that do not know me, I can see some people we already know each other, like Farah, I've seen you. Yeah, my name is Lorraine. I live in Coventry in England, UK. I came here in 2008 on a student visa. I worked a little bit, and then I claimed asylum in 2015. I was given refugee status in 2022. I now work as a community worker. I work for an organization called Migrant Voice, but I also still do community organizing outside of my work. So yeah, I've been asked to reflect on my involvement in the development of this strategy that has just been presented to you. Myself and Francesca, we know each other from around 2020 when the pandemic started. There was a campaign that also started, Status Now for All, which is calling for the UK government to give regularization status, immigration status to everyone that is in this country. So since then, we've been we've been campaigning on this. So when this came, she sent me a WhatsApp text message to say, "Oh, Ren, I'm now doing this work with the Crossborder, and so we want to do a consultation. I wondered if you would be interested, and there is a compensation for it. If you are interested, send me your email address." So I did. And then she explained more information about this. And she sent me, she also sent me the questionnaire, the questions that we were supposed to discuss, and then we met on Zoom, and she explained about invoices so that I could get compensated. After that, she sent an email telling us about the next steps, that, okay, we are now analyzing the report and writing the report. She asked about our availability, like consulting, if you're available on this day, this time, this day. And then a date was agreed. We met. Before meeting, she sent out all the instructions and agenda. And during the meeting, we had interpreters, just like we have now. After that meeting, which was like an interactive session, we were given some few days to, in case we still have something else to add to the document that we were contributing to. So why was Francesca doing all of this? A lot of communication, a lot of explaining, a lot of reaching out to me and all of that. Why is it important to have a seat on the table? Number one, it's to avoid huge mistakes that we usually see in the migration sector. I'll give you an example of, there is a campaign where people were calling for people who should be detained for 28 days. But people who have been in detention before, they were asking, who did they consult? Because we wonder if anyone who has been in detention would want to be in detention for 28 days. All we want is to end the hostile environment. Nobody should be detained. So if people are calling for 28 days, who said that? Who made those demands? And on what basis were they? So it just shows the importance of engaging with people with lived experiences so that we can have clarity on what is needed. Also, beside that, I think historically, we have seen that every campaign, every struggle, it's led by people who are affected by the issues. If we talk about, for example, women's rights, it was women in the forefront campaigning. LGBTQI community in the forefront campaigning about the rights. So why we can't allow that space as well to have people who have lived the experience of immigration, support them in a way that they can lead and be part of what we are trying to achieve. So the experience that I was involved in was not just a tick box, it was a meaningful one. This is why I'm even here now talking to you guys, because it was an open thing to say, okay, this is what is transparency kind of thing. So yeah, there was compensation involved in the work. What I hear most here in the UK, I'm talking because I live in UK, so I don't know what is happening in France or Belgium or somewhere else, but I'm talking about here. I've seen people when they are advertising for these like advisory boards or things like that for free. And then when you ask, they say, oh, if we attach money to it, it will attract wrong people. So for me, I've been thinking, say, even jobs that have a highest amount of money, it will attract best people. How does it become the opposite for an asylum seeker or a refugee? If you want to be part of, something to contribute, money will, if there's a compensation, it will attract wrong people. How has that changed? Because we know the other way around. And in the same place, we also know that it is people, asylum seekers and migrants who are struggling. Some people are even struggling to have access to Wi-Fi. So if we are saying, no, we cannot compensate or we cannot support someone because it will attract wrong people, are you even going to contribute then? Because you can't. I have seen in the past where every attendee of the conference would get, for example, £150 per day. The people that organized that event, they also gave vouchers to people who were asylum seekers in the form of honorarium, the same amount, £150. So it means there are some options that are within the legal structures that can be used instead of just maybe saying, no, we'll attract wrong people because we are valuing someone's time. Me and myself, I'm glad that all this time that I was involved in this, my contribution were valued and I have been compensated. I've also heard people who say, oh, we don't use interpreters. Can you imagine yourself, everyone else is speaking, but in a language that you don't understand, that no one is bothered? Does it mean that you don't have an opinion on the issue that is being discussed? No, maybe you are the one holding the solution in that case. So if we are saying, no, we don't use interpreters, what are we trying to mean? So I just applaud that this group here, we have interpreters, as well as when we're doing the strategy, interpreters were engaged for people that needed interpreters. So for me, there are these 5 things that I want to leave with you guys. That probably we should also be considering. How are we doing with time? Are we okay?
Yeah, we're doing great on time.
Okay, fantastic. I'm nearly there. So 5 things. Number 1, dignity. I am a woman of faith. Jesus said, do unto others as you would want to be done to you. Let us see people and treat people the way we would want to be treated. Anything short of this, it means we are taking away people's dignity. You are taking away our dignity. Number 2, respect. Just because you are an asylum seeker, it doesn't mean, or you are a migrant in transit, or you are stuck in Cali, or all of that, it doesn't mean that you have lost your ability to think and reason. It doesn't mean that you have lost your capability in making decisions regarding your own priorities. I hear a lot of people sometimes when they say, oh, we'll give you a £15 voucher for your food, and you have to show us receipts from, you know, complicated things like I buy my food, for example, I buy my food from people who went home and brought food. So it's food from Malawi, my own cultural food. So there's no receipt involved. Can we not find ways? After all, it's on a £15. It's not like £300 that has to be accounted for here. So can we not find means and ways that can also work so that people have the capacity to make decisions regarding their priorities, their wishes, their choices, and things like that? Number 3, agency. Not all migrants, not all asylum seekers and refugees are the same. We all are different and have different needs. It needs to be respected. Number 4, this country, almost all countries have got a constitution that we abide by, or in this country, I think it's Bill of Rights and things like that. So those rights that are applied to local people, we need to apply the same rights to even people who have come and live with us, migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. And the final point is, I believe that diversity enriches our communities, enriches our lives. So whether someone has what we call skills, if a doctor, is a nurse, or you do not have any skill, the fact that they are here, they are human beings, and they are coming from Malawi with their Malawian contribution, that is what needs to be celebrated. So I guess in all of this, what we are saying is, as we fight to end hostile environment, hostility across Europe and everywhere else, let us consider and put in the forefront of these campaigns people who are going through those difficulties, because we might miss on what is really important to the people that we are trying to help. So to close, I said I'm gonna read a second poem. So this poem I'm reading from my new book. And this second book is called Now I Sing. And the poem I'm reading is called Solidarity. I have been exposed to the love of strangers, seen direct smiles or smiling faces under masks. It has been eye-opening to know that so much solidarity exists in this city, that a homeless girl can share a life and be provided with a home away from home. It has been a learning curve to have my privileges checked closely. For a Malawian girl to speak English and be handed numerous awards, it has been mind-blowing. To experience greatness alongside respected leaders. I have seen the better side of humanity. Love instead of hate. It warms my heart and gives me hope that humanity is in a better place in how it cares for other humans. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you for that poem, and thank you for talking about your experiences. That was really beautiful and enriching, and I appreciate the honesty with which you spoke. Right, so now we're going to move on to Q&A. And I'm going to kick us off by asking one question to one or two questions to Chung, and then one or two questions to Lorraine. And then if you have questions for either of them or me, you can just put them in the chat. Okay, so I'll start us off with some questions for Chung. So first, were there any surprises in the analysis? And or what came out in the interviews, and then could you maybe speak about what wasn't included in the final strategy?
Thank you. So what surprises me in an analysis? It's quite I don't know. So for me, like it's surprising, but maybe it's not surprising, but it's quite frustrating. Like we always, especially in terms of the lack of capacity, I think a lot of people like raised these issues in our consultations. But this is continuous challenge of capacity, particularly in areas like fundraising and then resource mobilization. Again, this has been recognized as a very, very long-standing issue, but it appears that there has been really little progress in addressing these capacity gaps. And especially for those small organizations, we always struggle with not only financial capacity, but human capacity. And I don't think this is really good for us and also for the people who would like to work it and we're working with. Because, for example, in my organization, so we kind of recently we experienced many staff changing because of their visa issues. Like they cannot really stay in the UK, and even though they would like to work with us, we cannot also provide a sponsorship or anything. So we keep changing the staff, and this is really affecting our work because our work needs to build kind of connection with the communities and those refugees and asylum seekers. So it really affects how to build the trust, and we always need to restart. But this has been really, and if we would like to continue this work, we need to get the funding, or we need to really get some money. But we always raise this issue to the funders or those partners and those policymakers, but still we are struggling. So I just think it's a bit not surprising, but a bit frustrating. Yeah, so I really this is kind of really urgency, a call for really more thinking about how to improve these gaps and what's the realistic a solution to for us to increase our collective ability to do our work, but also enhance our operational capabilities. I really wanted to highlight this again. And then what was not included. So most of the things have been included and integrated within our strategy, but what was not included is more like a kind of practical aspect on how the forum works, or how we reach out to people with the relevant experience. So I remember it's also connected or linking back to the mutual benefits. So how the forum can be useful to forum members and their work. So some of people said, oh, need to deliver cross-border strategy, or we need to connect with other international forums or networks for a space for us to speak or have a dialogue or coordinated international action, and also have a good relationship or building a relationship with those funders, and building a kind of helping us to build a network with them or some good relationship with the parliamentaries. So there were a bit of kind of more expensive scope that includes maybe a national, international level, or some more directly focused on the border issues like racism and state policies that we were discussing. But also there are kind of more specific and direct actions or services like legal support, having information sharing, and more financially direct support. So, but this is, we didn't really kind of how the forum can develop, like benefiting, also being benefited with this forum members. We didn't really develop further. But also another thing is the outreach strategies. So there were kind of different ways that we can reach out to the people with the relevant experience, with the lived experience. So for example, some focusing on the use of personal networks and word of mouth. So basically like using our own personal network, but others also kind of suggested that more like strategic and more like, yeah, our strategic includes outreach methods like other that go beyond the personal contact, like visiting community centers or drop-ins, and also like asylum seekers accommodation. Again, but this outreach strategies was not fully developed within our strategy document. So maybe these are the things that the forum members can consider how, yeah, they would like to improve.
Thank you, Chung. And now for Lorraine, 2 questions, but they're quite linked. What would your message be to other organizations that are considering doing this work? And then maybe what is your overall message for the sector?
Yeah, I think the overall message is end hostile environment. I know a lot of people, different organizations focus on different things. Oh, we campaign for this, for maternity rights, for this, different things, which is all great. But at the end of the day, all what we want is to end the hostile environment. So where you are campaigning, whatever campaign you are focusing on, always also talk about ending the hostile environment, because it's only then that everyone will be free. So much as we campaign for others, different things, but let us combine with end hostile environment, ending hostile environment, and also doing some work that is towards that ending of hostile environment. The message to people who are doing this is, to me, we need to work together, I think, because there is a problem where there's always like, oh, they don't do it in the right way, or this, they are not doing it the right way. Fine. But we need to become, to all of us, to work towards one goal, which is ending hostile environment. And we need to be together so that our voice can be heard instead of being in our single pockets of work. Yeah. So it's about working together, build a big movement of all of us campaigning and facing the hostile environment with one voice.
Thank you, Lorraine. Now, if there are any questions from the attendees, feel free to put them in the chat or put your camera on and ask them.
Hi, can I ask something?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you so much for the session, and also as someone who was involved in tiny bits of this through the sessions you helped organize, Francesca. I echo Lorraine's words that it was so incredibly thoughtful from the beginning till the end, and it models the kind of work that ideally would see more of across the sector. So thank you. Thanks both for the research and all the work you've done. And then the other one was, you might have covered this, apologies, but I'm curious about the dissemination of this plan, because I think that there's more and more talk of lived experience, which is really positive. And at the same time, it's shown that there are gaps in what that means, how that looks like in implementation, and there could be potential issues that come up with it, like the lack of maybe safeguarding, let's say, or tokenization, you know, all the risks that are mentioned. So I'm curious, yeah, how this work can be of benefit to others. I've already forwarded it to my colleagues and hope more people read it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Farah. Yeah, so the plan is for the forum to start implementing the recommendations, and I think that's probably going to be something that we do at the next Cross-Border Forum meeting, where we actually look at the strategy and think about how it's going to be implemented. And in terms of the broader sector, my plan is to share it within all of the like classic migrant sector networks, and especially once we have a website that's up and running, which will hopefully be next week, then the strategy itself will be easier to share. And I haven't had a massive like think about what will disseminate it, how it will be disseminated in the sector, because I think the big task is going to be how do we integrate it in the forum. But I think just having this session recorded, for example, and available for people to watch, hopefully will make it more accessible. And yeah, obviously we're open to like meeting with other organizations that want to do similar work, or exchanging and sharing strategies. But yeah, hopefully it will have an impact, and hopefully people outside of the forum will be interested in reading it, and that it will be useful either as a template or as something that people think, oh, that's not very good, we want to do something even better. Like, that's great if people want to build on it.
Thank you. I'm sure it will be very, very useful. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from people in the audience?
Ouais, je voulais. Okay, bon.
Yes, hello. I'd like to apologize because I have construction going on here. So if you hear any background noise, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make a little comment rather than a question with regard to what has just been presented. I think this space really needs to be valued. We need to coordinate our work with other organizations. I think there are other individuals who might be able to participate in this. I think it's something that's going to be able to be enlarged. We hope it will be a good basis. Here in Senegal, we are looking at how we can work with all the different organizations working within this sector. There are over 100 working on issues of migration. So how can we improve our links? There's a lot of experience here already. So how can we really draw on this? And how can we consider access to finance, funding that will be able to support our activities and give us some possibilities to continue and enlarge what we're doing. And here in Senegal, I think it's important also to reflect on individuals who are working on policy within the governmental sector, who are responsible for funding, etc. How can we perhaps establish better links with them in our work to find solutions and to try to really move forward in the best way together? I think it's important to reflect more on this, and I'm analyzing this at the moment. I see that there's a lot of interest from people with great initiatives, but I think sometimes the integration and the access issues are problematic. I think there are some priorities already from different sides that need to be brought together. We're looking at what's happening on a government level. We can see what funding's coming in, even from Europe, for example. But how can we really improve our channels of communication with our government bodies? We have been in development networks as well, trying to work with bodies that work here in this country, but also outside. We've been trying to look at funding from these channels for our programs to really improve the way in which we can carry out our work. But sometimes there are issues that come up in terms of the conditions in which we're working, and I think it's really important to make sure that everybody who wants to be involved in this work can actually have good ways of accessing these channels. I think a lot of work being done by associations is looking really on looking at how they can fight some of the structures in place, but we need to perhaps look at better integration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Selyu. That's really interesting and a bit, I guess, not surprising that the situations with funders are so similar across contexts. I think the forum is particularly lucky, and I'm not just saying that because some of our funders are on this call, but the forum is particularly lucky because our funders give us quite a bit of freedom in terms of how we lead our activities and what our objectives and strategies are. But yeah, I think especially in the context of development work, it is really being pushed by a specific agenda and a specific governmental agenda. So yeah, thank you so much for raising that and for joining us as well. I know how busy you are. Right, so in terms of next steps, I'll just repeat that we will be disseminating it again in the Cross-Border Forum and in our networks, and then it will be the task of the forum to collectively decide how to take forward the recommendations and action them. And my plan or my suggestion is that at the next Cross-Border Forum meeting, we take the time to go through the recommendations and have a think about it, or plan a separate meeting. And yeah, and I'll send you the link to the Cross-Border Forum website with the strategy once it's up and running. And I think we can leave it there. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you in particular to Chung and to Lorraine for speaking so eloquently and brilliantly. And again, yeah, just for giving your time and energy and expertise. It's been really great working with you all.